The rain fell gently on the windows of a small apartment in downtown Seattle. It was one of those soft, endless rains that made everything feel slower, quieter, more thoughtful. Inside, Emily Carter stood in front of her mirror, a pale blue dress halfway zipped, her fingers trembling. She had ordered it weeks ago for her best friend Lily's wedding. She'd imagined herself walking into that hall with confidence, looking like the woman she always wanted to be, put together, calm, and maybe even a little beautiful. But now, staring at her reflection, all she could see was the stubborn zipper that refused to move another inch. She pulled at it gently, then harder, biting her lip when it wouldn't budge. "Come on, please," she whispered, as if the dress could hear her. It didn't. She finally let out a shaky laugh and sank onto the edge of her bed, the dress wrinkled in defeat. Her cat, a sleepy tabby named Milo, looked up from the corner as if to ask what the problem was this time. Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. It wasn't just the dress. It was everything lately, the long work hours at her marketing job, the quiet evenings that blurred together, the feeling that life was moving faster than she could keep up with. Her friends were getting married, traveling, building lives. And she was stuck in a dress that didn't fit and maybe in a version of herself that didn't either. The knock on the door startled her. She quickly pulled on a sweater over the half-zipped dress and opened it. Standing there, holding 2 coffees and a grin, was Ethan Hale. Ethan had been in her life for years, ever since college, where they'd shared late-night study sessions, cheap pizza, and the kind of friendship that always felt like it could turn into something more if either of them had been brave enough. He was tall, with soft brown eyes and the kind of smile that made people feel seen. "Morning," he said, handing her a coffee. "You look—" He paused, glancing at her sweater-covered outfit, then smiled wider. "Half ready." She laughed, embarrassed. "Don't ask. The dress isn't cooperating. Can I see?" he asked. She hesitated. "It doesn't fit." He leaned against the doorframe. "Maybe it just needs a little help. Let me try." Before she could protest, Ethan set his coffee down and motioned for her to turn around. She did, her heart thudding faster than it should. His fingers brushed the zipper gently, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "It will fit." Something in the way he said it calm, certain, like he believed in her more than she believed in herself, made her chest tighten. He tugged carefully, but the zipper refused to move. After a moment, he stepped back, laughing quietly. "Okay, maybe not today. But hey, the color suits you." Emily turned to face him, blushing. "You're just being nice." He shook his head. "I mean it. You look good." She wanted to believe him, but all she could think about was the small space between what she wished for and what she was. Ethan handed her the coffee again and sat down by the window, watching the rain. "You've been quiet lately," he said after a moment. "Everything all right?" "Work's been busy," she said automatically. "Work's always busy," he replied, looking at her with that knowing expression. "What's really going on?" Emily looked down at her coffee, tracing the rim with her thumb. "I don't know, Ethan. I just feel like I'm standing still while everyone else is moving. And this stupid dress just reminded me of that." He nodded slowly, not pushing, just listening. That was one of the things she loved about him. He never filled silence with noise. He let her think, "Maybe you're not standing still," he said quietly. "Maybe you're just getting ready for what's next." She smiled weakly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, "but that's okay. The hard parts usually mean you're growing." For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee while the rain softened outside. It felt like the world had slowed just enough for her to breathe again. When Ethan finally stood to leave, he looked around the apartment, his eyes resting on the unopened box the dress had come in. "You know," he said, "it's just fabric. You're the one who makes it look good. Don't let it tell you otherwise." After he left, Emily stood by the window, watching him walk away under the gray sky. She didn't know why his words stayed with her, but they did. That quiet confidence, that warmth in his voice, it lingered long after he was gone. Later that evening, she stood in front of the mirror again. The dress still didn't zip, but she didn't cry this time. Instead, she ran her fingers over the smooth blue fabric and smiled softly. Maybe it wasn't about the dress at all. Maybe it was about the way she saw herself always trying to fit into something smaller, tighter, more acceptable. The rain eased outside, the last drops sliding down the glass. Emily poured herself another cup of coffee and curled up by the window. She thought about Ethan, his easy laughter, his gentle honesty, and wondered when she had started needing his voice to quiet her doubts. For the first time in a while, she didn't feel so alone. Maybe he was right. Maybe things didn't have to fit perfectly right away. Maybe it was enough to just keep trying, one day at a time. The city lights began to glow through the mist. She glanced at her phone, no new messages, but her heart felt strangely full, somewhere between the broken zipper and Ethan's quiet words. Something inside her had shifted. She stood, folded the dress carefully, and placed it back in the box. Someday, she whispered to herself, you'll fit just right. And as she turned off the lights and stepped into the calm of the evening, she realized she wasn't talking about the dress anymore. The next morning, Seattle's streets glowed wet from the night rain. Emily walked quickly to the cafe near her office, her hair still damp, her mind replaying Ethan's words. Don't be afraid. It will fit. It had sounded simple at the time, almost casual, but the way he said it had stayed with her. It wasn't just about the dress anymore. It felt like he had looked right into her, seen the part she kept hidden, the part that doubted, hesitated, and stayed quiet when she wanted to speak. She spotted him through the cafe window before she went inside. Ethan was already there, sitting at their usual corner table with 2 coffees, his sketchbook open in front of him. He had always been that way, calm, steady. Like he carried his own kind of weather around with him. Morning, she said as she sat down. Morning, he replied with a smile. I ordered your usual. You okay? She nodded, though her eyes gave her away. Ethan didn't push, but she knew he could see through her. He always could. The cafe was half full, the low hum of chatter mixing with the sound of rain tapping softly on the windows. For a moment, it felt peaceful. But inside her, something felt restless, like there were too many words waiting to be said and not enough courage to say them. They talked about normal things at first. Work, their mutual friends, the gallery he was preparing for. Ethan was an artist, though he rarely called himself one. His paintings were quiet, full of light and emotion. Like he painted the spaces between people more than the people themselves. Are you nervous? She asked. He shrugged. A little. It's my first solo show, so yeah, maybe a lot. But I think that's part of it. If you're not nervous, it probably doesn't matter enough. Emily smiled. You always make things sound simpler than they are. He looked up from his coffee, meeting her eyes. Or maybe you make things harder than they need to be. The words hit deeper than she expected. She looked away, pretending to watch the rain, but inside, she knew he was right. She had spent so long second-guessing herself at work, in love, even in the smallest choices. Somewhere along the way, fear had become a habit. Do you ever feel like you missed something? She asked quietly. Like life went one way and you didn't? Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking, sometimes. But I think we always end up where we're supposed to, even if it's not where we planned. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe everything he said. But part of her couldn't help wondering, if that was true, then why did she always feel one step behind? Why did every version of happiness feel slightly out of reach? Their conversation drifted into silence. Outside, people hurried past with umbrellas, cars splashing through puddles. The world kept moving, and for a moment, Emily felt herself caught between wanting to stay and wanting to run. Ethan broke the silence with a soft laugh. Remember college? How you used to say you'd leave Seattle the minute you graduated? She smiled faintly. Yeah, I thought I'd move somewhere sunny. California, maybe. I was sure I'd never get used to the rain. And yet, here you are, he said. Here I am, she echoed. He tilted his head. Do you regret it? She shook her head slowly. No, I just thought I'd be someone else by now. Ethan smiled gently. You still can be. You're allowed to start over anytime you want. That sentence stayed in her mind long after they left the cafe. She went through her workday distracted, thinking about what starting over really meant. Did it mean leaving her job? Moving? Or was it something quieter? Learning to see herself differently? To stop waiting for perfection before she let herself live? That evening, she returned home, tired but unable to rest. The dress box still sat on her dresser, untouched. She lifted the lid again and ran her fingers over the soft blue fabric. It wasn't the dress's fault it didn't fit. Maybe she had bought it too small, or maybe she had changed since she'd ordered it. Either way, it wasn't something to hate herself for. She slipped it on again, carefully pulling the zipper as far as it would go. This time, she didn't get frustrated. She stood there in front of the mirror, her reflection quiet and unsure, but stronger somehow. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. Made some progress on the new painting. Want to see it tomorrow? She smiled, typing back before she could overthink it. Sure, I'd love to. When she arrived at his studio the next evening, the space smelled like paint and rain. Large canvases leaned against the walls, each one different but carrying the same sense of emotion. He showed her the pieces, soft shades of gray and blue with faint hints of gold. They reminded her of hope trying to break through a cloudy sky. But one painting stood apart, covered by a white sheet. What's that one? She asked. He hesitated. It's not finished yet. She stepped closer, curious. Can I see? Not yet, he said with a small smile. It's personal. The word made her heart stir. She wanted to ask more, but didn't. She understood art was how he spoke when words failed. She, too, had things she couldn't explain. Things she hid behind small smiles and polite answers as they cleaned up the studio later. Ethan asked quietly, "You know what I think about that dress?" She looked at him in surprise. "You still remember that?" He nodded. "Of course. I think it's not supposed to fit yet. Some things take time." She laughed softly. "You make everything sound like a metaphor." He smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "Maybe it is. Maybe everything's just a lesson waiting for us to understand it." When Emily got home that night, she felt lighter. The city lights shimmered through her window, and for the first time in a while, the rain didn't feel heavy. It felt cleansing. She sat on her bed, staring at the dress, thinking about Ethan's words, about his quiet patience, about how he always seemed to see something in her she couldn't, somewhere deep down. She realized she wasn't afraid of the dress not fitting anymore. What scared her was the idea of staying the same, of never trying, never risking, never reaching for more. She took a deep breath and whispered into the still room. "Maybe it's time." The words felt small but powerful. The kind that start change, not with noise, but with quiet certainty. And as the night stretched on, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, soft but steady, like the beginning of a new season. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world felt clean, waiting. And somewhere in the distance, she imagined Ethan still painting, still believing in her, in the art, in everything that didn't quite fit yet, but someday would. The morning was crisp, sunlight slipping through thin clouds over the Seattle skyline. Emily stood at her kitchen counter, staring at the message on her phone. "Ethan, if you're free today, come by the studio. I could use an extra pair of hands." She smiled, a quiet flutter of warmth spreading through her chest. The past few weeks had felt different, lighter somehow. After so many days of running in circles with her own doubts, Ethan's quiet steadiness had started to pull her out of the fog. She grabbed her jacket and headed out. Coffee in hand, her heart beating just a little faster than usual. The city streets were still wet from the morning rain, and the air smelled like fresh beginnings. When she arrived at the studio, Ethan was bent over a large canvas, paint streaked across his forearm. Music played softly in the background, something slow and thoughtful. "You came," he said, turning to her with that easy smile that always seemed to steady her. "You said you needed help," she replied, teasing. "Though I'm not sure I'm qualified for. Whatever this is, you'll do fine," he said, handing her a paintbrush. I just need someone to hold this steady while I adjust the lighting." She laughed, taking the brush as if it were something delicate. The studio was filled with half-finished paintings, quiet city streets, blurred silhouettes, soft lights through rain. It all looked like emotion turned into color. As Ethan moved the spotlight, his voice filled the space between them. "You know, you've been different lately," he said casually. "Happier, maybe." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "You think?" He nodded, adjusting the angle of the lamp. "Yeah, you used to walk in here like you were carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Now you look lighter." She looked down, smiling softly. "Maybe I just stopped expecting everything to be perfect. Maybe that's the trick." "Maybe," he said, and for a moment their eyes met steady, warm, unspoken. He moved toward another canvas and lifted a white sheet that had been draped over it. Emily's eyes caught a glimpse of muted blues and golds before he quickly covered it again. "Not that one," he said, smiling almost nervously. "It's not ready yet." She tilted her head, curious. "Why do I feel like that one's important?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because it is. But some things take time to show. Like paintings, like people." The way he said it made her heart skip. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the air between them felt too fragile to disturb. Instead, they worked in comfortable silence. She cleaned brushes while he adjusted canvases. Occasionally their hands brushed, sending tiny sparks through the quiet air. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was simple, real. The kind of connection that builds slowly and means everything. After an hour, Ethan stepped back and studied his work. "You know," he said, "every artist has that one piece they're afraid to finish." "Why afraid?" Emily asked. "Because once you finish it," he said, "it's not yours anymore. It belongs to whoever sees it." She thought about that. Maybe people are like that too. Maybe that's why we hold back. Once we let someone see the real us, we can't take it back. Ethan looked at her quietly, his eyes soft but searching. Maybe that's the point. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The air felt heavy in the best way, like something important was being said without words. As the afternoon light shifted, Ethan disappeared into the back room and returned holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, placing it gently in her hands. "What is it?" she asked, surprised. "Something small," he said with a grin. "Don't open it yet. Wait till you get home." Gave him a mock glare. "You know, I hate surprises." "That's exactly why you need one," he teased. When she left the studio, the sun had broken through the clouds. The streets shimmered with gold light, and the world felt a little softer than usual. She carried the box carefully, resisting the urge to peek inside. At home. She set it on the table, made herself a cup of tea, and finally opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a delicate silver zipper pull shaped like a tiny heart. Beneath it, a folded note in Ethan's handwriting, for when you're ready to try again. "Don't be afraid, it will fit someday." Her throat tightened as she read it. It wasn't just a gift. It was a message. A reminder of the conversation they'd had weeks ago. The dress that didn't fit. The doubt that had held her back. She held the zipper pull between her fingers, feeling its weight, small but meaningful. He had remembered. Not just the dress, but everything that came with it. The insecurity, the frustration, the moment she'd almost cried. And he'd turned it into something beautiful. Tears stung her eyes not from sadness, but from being seen. Really seen? She walked to her bedroom and opened the box where the dress still rested. Carefully, she placed the zipper pull beside it. She wasn't ready to try it on yet, and that was okay. For the first time, she felt no pressure to rush. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the way Ethan had looked at her in the studios. Steady Tom. Like he was holding back something he didn't want to say too soon. Maybe that's what love was. It's not grand gestures or dramatic words, but quiet understanding. The kind that waited patiently. The kind that didn't need to be forced. Over the next few days, Emily found herself walking taller, smiling easier. At work, she spoke up in meetings. At home, she finally started painting again. Something she hadn't done since college. She realized she had been waiting for someone to give her permission to feel worthy. But maybe she didn't need permission anymore. Ethan checked in now and then, texting photos of his progress, always adding little comments that made her laugh. But he never mentioned the box or the note again. He didn't have to. A week later, he called her one evening. "The gallery date's been set," he said, his voice excited. "Friday night? You're coming, right?" "Of course," she said. "Wouldn't miss it." "Good," he replied. "And, wear something that makes you feel like yourself." She smiled into the phone. "That's easy. I'm getting better at that." When the call ended, she stood for a moment in the quiet apartment, thinking about everything that had changed. It wasn't the dress or the zipper or even Ethan's word "zit," was the way she had started to see herself differently. She looked at the blue dress one more time, still folded neatly in the box, the little silver zipper pull resting on top. Not yet, she thought, but soon. Because now she finally believed what he had said that day. Don't be afraid. It will fit. Not just the dress, but life itself, the love, the version of herself she had been too scared to step into. It would fit one day, and when it did, she would be ready. The evening of Ethan's art exhibition arrived with a sky washed in gold and soft gray. Seattle looked alive, streets glimmering after a brief rain, windows reflecting the fading sun. Emily stood in front of her mirror, her breath catching slightly as she stared at herself. The pale blue dress, the one that once refused to zip, now fit perfectly. She had tried it on without expectation, but the zipper had glided up smoothly this time, like it had simply been waiting for the right moment. For a second, she just stood there, smiling at her reflection. It wasn't about the dress anymore. It was about the quiet confidence in her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed, the way she finally felt at home in her own skin. She slipped on a pair of simple silver earrings, grabbed her bag, and headed out into the evening. The gallery was tucked into a narrow street near the water, a warm glow spilling through its tall windows. People moved inside, talking softly, wine glasses in hand. The hum of conversation mixed with the faint sound of a cello playing from hidden speakers. Emily hesitated at the door for a moment. She had been to too many events like this before, but this one felt different. This wasn't just any artist show, was Ethan's. And though she didn't want to admit it, her heart had been waiting for this night. As she walked inside, her eyes immediately found him. Ethan stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small crowd. He looked different tonight, confident but humble, the kind of calm that comes from doing something that matters. His eyes lifted just as she stepped in, and when he saw her, his smile softened into something real, something only meant for her. "You made it," he said, walking toward her. "Of course," she replied. "I wouldn't miss it." He looked her over, taking in the dress, the calm glow in her face. "It fits," he said quietly, a half smile forming. "It does," she said, her voice light but full of meaning. "Told you it just needed time." They shared a small laugh, the kind that carried more than words could explain. He led her through the gallery, showing her the paintings one by one. Each canvas felt like a moment suspended in time-gentle city lights reflected in puddles. Distant silhouettes crossing rain-washed streets, hands almost touching, but not quite. His art had always been emotional, but this collection was deeper. There was something human in it, longing, hope, quiet heartbreak, and the beauty of stillness. Emily felt drawn to every piece, but her eyes kept returning to the far corner of the room, where one painting was still covered with a white sheet. "What's that one?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled a little, his eyes flicking toward it. "The last one," he said. "I was saving it for the end." As the evening went on, more guests arrived. Laughter filled the air. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked. But through it all, Emily and Ethan kept finding each other's eyes across the room, like a quiet current that ran only between them. After the speeches and congratulations, when the crowd began to thin, Ethan walked to the corner of the gallery and gently took hold of the white sheet. The room quieted. He glanced once at Emily before pulling it away. The painting underneath caught her breath. It wasn't a landscape or a street scene, it was a portrait. A woman standing in soft light, wearing a pale blue dress, looking both fragile and strong at once. Her head was turned slightly, her expression thoughtful, almost serene. The background was simple, a window behind her with rain streaks glowing in gold. For a long time, Emily couldn't move. The woman in the painting wasn't just her likeness, it was her story. Every brushstroke carried something she recognized, the quiet uncertainty she had once lived in. The tenderness of becoming, the soft confidence that had taken its place. Underneath the painting, in neat handwriting, was the title, "Don't be afraid, it will fit." The words echoed through her chest like a heartbeat. The same words he had said to her that morning weeks ago, when she'd stood in front of the mirror feeling small and unsure. She looked at Ethan, eyes wide, overwhelmed. "You painted this," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "You inspired it." Her throat tightened, and for a moment she couldn't find the right words. The noise of the gallery faded away. All she could hear was the quiet hum of music and the pulse of her own heart. Ethan stepped closer. "That day you told me the dress didn't fit," he said softly. "You looked so defeated. But I saw something else. I saw someone trying, someone who didn't give up even when she thought she'd failed. I wanted to capture that." She blinked back tears. "You remembered all of it. Every detail," he said with a faint smile. "Sometimes you paint what you feel before you understand it. I think that's what this was for me." Emily looked back at the painting, then at him. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice trembling. He smiled gently. "So are you." The words weren't loud, but they landed deep, wrapping around her like warmth. For a moment, neither of them moved. The space between them held everything what had been said, what hadn't, and everything waiting in between. She wanted to say something back, something equally honest, but all that came out was a whisper. "Thank you." He shook his head slightly. "You don't have to thank me. You just had to believe me." They stood there in the soft light of the gallery, surrounded by his art and the faint scent of paint and rain. The evening had slowed to a hush, guests wandering quietly, the cello music fading into something delicate. Emily realized, as she looked at the painting again, that her heart didn't feel heavy anymore. The fear, the hesitation, the quiet self-doubt that had followed her for so long, it wasn't gone completely, but it no longer controlled her. Ethan's words came back to her, the same ones that had started everything. "Don't be afraid. It will fit." She smiled, turning toward him. "You were right," she said softly. "I usually am," he said, his eyes glinting playfully. She laughed, and for the first time in a long while, the sound came from somewhere deep, somewhere free. As the night drew to an end, she helped him clean up after the guests had left. The city outside was quiet, the moon reflected in puddles on the street. When they stepped outside, Ethan walked beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly. "You know," he said after a pause, "the thing about our tan life is that nothing ever fits perfectly right away. But that doesn't mean it won't. It just means it's still becoming what it's meant to be." Emily looked at him, her heart steady. "I think I finally understand that." He smiled, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow the sound of the water. The soft air, the street lights glowing like small stars. They didn't need to say anything else. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything that mattered. As they walked together down the quiet street, the words painted beneath her portrait stayed with her, echoing gently in her heart. "Don't be afraid, it will fit." And this time she believed it completely.